Hi everybody, it's Jackie Schomburg-Minen. Typically I do the grid journals in my grid journal, but today I found these 4x4 panels and I thought I would make a bit of an abstract mixed media project that would then peel apart into these small panels. So I have 12 of them here and see what happened. So you guys have probably seen I used to use large sheets of paper and do some crazy, free expressive drawing and painting and then cut up the paper. This is the same thing just with panels that are pre-cut because they're separate panels. I taped them together so that they would stay together so I wouldn't have to worry about that. And I used some Neocolor 2 crayons to activate the panels just to get things started, and I'm spreading some paint around. This is one of my Catalyst, I don't even know if it's called a Catalyst wedge when it has the impressions cut out, but that's what I use just to scrape through the paint. I'm mixing up some Celadon mixed with turquoise because I didn't want to use straight turquoise or straight Celadon, the Titan Green Pale. And I will say that one thing I regret about this exercise is that I was too aware of where the panels were separating. So I wasn't as free with my brushstrokes and my paint application as I would have been had it just been a single sheet of paper. And specifically, I just wanted to make sure I got every color on every square. So you may or may not notice that I'm loosening up now, but at first I was pretty focused on putting some green everywhere. This is a much softer palette than I'm used to, but I enjoyed it. I think I might have been influenced by Kelly Wynn Conrad. I've been taking a course with her that's been awesome. And she typically uses colors that remind me of this. So maybe I'm just channeling her color palette right now. So I'm adding some white just to quiet things down a bit in places. Again, I was very focused here on getting some white on every panel, which again, I regret. The joy of just using it as a one sheet, if I just pretended that it was one sheet, did a better job pretending instead of thinking of it as 12 separate panels, is then you get these organic, free brushstrokes that are unexpected. Without planning where they're going to be cut or pulled apart, you can get some really, really fun, interesting, unexpected marks that when you pull them apart, you're like, wow, this is cool. So when I did pull them apart, it was more, I don't know, some things were surprising, but it was much more expected. Pulled out some collage, wanted some stripes. These are actually purple stripes that I painted onto a piece of tissue. I was happy that I came up with a reason to use these panels. Sometimes I just end up buying things at Blick that I clearly don't need, but I thought would be fun. So I don't remember if I think this is 2 6-packs of the 4x4 panels. And they're not cradled panels, they're just flat on the back, and they have a cutout where you can hang them on a nail. But it feels, even though they're small and even though I'm sure I didn't spend a ton of money on them, it's nice to have it feel a little bit more extravagant than a regular grid journal or just cutting up a piece of paper. Extravagant, I'm sure, is not the right word, but it just felt a little bit more special than it would have on paper. Yet not too special, or I would have frozen up and, got in my head about wasting, or it needs to be special because it's on panels. I don't know that panels psych me out, but paper helps me be free. So if you are having trouble feeling free in your work and you're not working on paper at all, might I suggest trying out some paper and see if that gets you out of your head a bit. I think because paper is so plentiful and so cheap comparatively that it's just, there's very low stakes if you don't like what you made. I'm a firm believer in lowering expectations as much as possible. And not necessarily for other people, but for yourself. So when I show up to play, I'm showing up to play. I'm showing up to be curious about what I'm going to be making and what's going to come out of my paintbrush or my crayons or usually my color shaper. I do love a good color shaper. I'm not showing up to make a masterpiece that I'm going to sell for millions of dollars, even hundreds of dollars. I'm showing up to play and create. And if I make something that I love out of that, awesome. And if I don't, I still got to play, awesome. People talk about tennis as like a mental game. I feel like art is a mental game. Also much less physical than tennis. That was probably a really obvious metaphor. Oh my goodness. But that said, my point being that if you have a good handle on what's important and what you're going to focus on, if you're going to focus on playing versus perfection, if you can get your head straight around that, you'll create much more freely, in my experience. Anyway, as I was going on about that, I peeled all the panels off of the packing tape. Peeled panels packing tape. Be good alliteration for some poem, but it would be a terribly boring poem. And I'm going back to collage. These are very, very soft right now. The colors are soft and muted. The black is the most, well, the black and the red crayon, I suppose, are the punchy parts. And I spent a lot of time looking for collage pieces for these. That's my tiny box of tiny scraps. I wish I could remember how much time I spent on this, but it was a decent chunk of time. I probably spent 3 or 4 hours on the whole thing, start to finish, in different chunks of time. It was really fun to be able to pick up and move the squares. Obviously, if in a grid journal you can't do that. So I'd be able to, the only problem is there's only one spot for a nail and you can't change it. So the nail so like the way that they're oriented right now is the way that they're going to be hung. I can't change which way they're going to be hung easily, which is fine. I've noticed that I don't really change the orientation of the work that I do often. Maybe I should start doing that. I'm not opposed to doing it. I guess, don't think about it. But in this case, I couldn't. Well, that's not true. I could have, but I prefer to see what things are going to look like from the same orientation that it's going to be hung. So if that decision's already made for me, I lay it out the same way. The white that I'm using is the titanium white from Novacolor paints, which I really like their paints a lot. It's not a very opaque white. So I'm out of my golden heavy body white. That's my like go-to amazing luscious white. It's very thick, it's very opaque. But the beauty of the Novacolor paints, it allows you to build up the layers gradually. And obviously to see the layers underneath. Sorry about my voice, I'm still sick. This is like week 4 or 5 of this. But I'm much better than I was. Just that now my voice seems to be heading out. This collage piece, I just tore that piece off of, is the white butcher paper that I keep underneath my artwork on my desk. When it gets painty and I swap it out, I save interesting chunks for collage. Tried really hard to get that piece to work. Didn't work. I don't know what it is about certain pieces, but there are certain pieces that I really actively try to fit in. And if I look at one piece in the same spot a couple times, I'll often just glue it down because clearly there's something about it that I like. Keep trying. I want to add more of that Payne's Gray. As I'm moving things around, I was moving the things I considered more, I guess, more finished. The things that needed the less extra work to that top row. All right, I wasn't having any luck with my collage at that point, so I changed to do some glazing. So I'm warming these up a bit with some quinacridone gold. It's like adding some sunshine. And pretty much completing the rainbow. It's like get all my colors in. And with glazing, you can make the layer as thick or as thin as you like. If you wipe it on, then wipe it right off, it'll be a very, very thin layer. If you let it sit for a while and use more paint, then it will be much darker. Watching this over, I'm it's interesting because I'm sitting here thinking, yep, still doesn't work. Glad I didn't do that. So this is where I was going to stop. These are the 12 panels that I did. I really like this one. Something about this one that I like. Just a closer view. I ended up doing another round of edits that I will show you next. This one feels like it needs more. This one too, although it's close. This one I like, but there's no punch of color. So there's things I like about each of them and things I feel like there's more needed. So I ended up going back and I thought that this time I would look for some punchier pieces of collage. Really like how that teal piece fits in. And I got out my bigger box of collage paper, collage scraps. And you can see I'm not picking the most subtle pieces. A lot of the pieces I'm picking are bright colors, reds, blacks. Not unlike my typical palette. My rule in gathering collage materials is always grab more than you think you need. Buy like eight times more. It's like my garlic rule. If a recipe calls for 1 clove of garlic, you should add probably 10 or 12. They started feeling a lot more like me as I started adding this last round of collage scraps. Where I thought I was going to end, in the pictures I just showed you, they felt very unfinished to me, which is fine. But I had a bee in my bonnet and I kept going, and I'm glad that I did. This piece I liked in particular because that white part on the left looks like a balloon to me. I enjoyed that part. See that little balloon? Trying it a few more places just in case. It's all good until you glue it down. One thing I began to notice about these is that they're kind of 50-50, light and dark. Some of them are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. But I realized that, and I didn't love that. As I keep going, I'm trying to change that balance a bit and make something at least 60-40. I had success on some, not on others. You can keep working on these things indefinitely, right? I wanted to add this red piece in for a while. The problem with it is, one, it took up about half the square just because of how wide it was. I didn't want anything cutting the squares in half. The other thing that was tricky is that it was so much red, and I wanted it to be just a tiny bit of red as a little focal point instead of taking over half the square. You'll soon see though that I didn't I didn't mind something else taking up more than half the square later. This is a little picture of a fire, like a campfire. And I loved how the glow really lightened up the picture. So I enjoyed messing around with this yellow. Once I put that up, it made a lot of sense to me. It's bright, it's cheery. I liked it there, even though I wanted a pop of something there. I didn't think yellow would be the thing, since I was thinking maybe red or pink or something. But the yellow worked. I kept trying to add things that were very like a sideways stripe in various forms. And it just, I don't know why I kept trying, but it did not work. But I kept trying. I think I kept trying because I didn't know why it didn't work. And I think the reason it didn't work is I think that I really love horizontal lines that go across the entire canvas or panel in other people's work. But in my work, I apparently don't like it. Or at least I don't like it in this particular scenario. But I love it in other people's work. Go figure. This is a tiny piece of uh, paint that I peeled off of something, either my catalyst wedge or my like palette. Sometimes I get little things that are paint covered in gloss medium that I just peel off and then I can stick on stuff. Turn that leaf monoprint into a little upside down balloon. I think there's a rule in my house that everyone will be very quiet until I push record. That was hilarious. I could not have timed that better. Yeah, as soon as I push record, everyone who was quiet comes over here, rings the doorbell, knocks on my door, comes over to talk. Groceries are being put away with giant thumps and crashes. Ah, the joys of recording on the weekend. You can see the peanut M&Ms in my upper left. My husband was in India for a week, and I was home with all 3 sick children all week, and I lived off of chocolate. Not the best idea in the world, but not the worst idea in the world. Way better than cigarettes, don't you think? Never been a smoker, but I could be a chocoholic for sure. Another piece I kept trying to fit in. I do like it here. It's subtle, but it adds a little bit more oomph on that side. All right, so now we're getting toward my giant yellow piece. And I don't know why I love it, but I love it. I love that it takes over so much of this square. And it gives 0 F's about it. It's large and in charge. And I love that it's bright yellow, so it's exciting, but it's also the only plain area on the square. So all in all, I'm so glad that I kept going with these, because they end up in a place that feels a lot more finished than the first time I stopped. A lot more balanced compositionally. A lot more fun, in my humble opinion. And the thing that I, again, love about doing a series of things at once, like the grid journal, like making one big sheet of paper, cutting that into 12 pieces or 6 pieces even. I love that you get to play with the same color scheme, if you so choose, and the same, the same materials, because you're using everything at the same time, and seeing how many different combinations you can come up with in that. In every single panel, I made different choices. I used different materials within the, even though I overlapped a few times with that checkerboard tissue right there, I used that a few different places, but not everywhere. And I put it in different positions. So every time you make a different choice, it gives you some variety, and the pieces still go together, so they could still be part of the same body of work, because you can tell that there's a through line, in this case of the color palette, of the placement and the characteristics of the black that I used. Some of the same collage material overlaps. There are different common threads that go through all of these panels. Now I'm adding this green gold glaze on top. So making these decisions across all the panels, or many of the panels, gives you, it's like instant cohesion. Don't need to overthink it. You're just adding things to the same, you're adding the same things to each of the different panels. I put a tiny bit of green gold on that yellow piece just to have it not be completely floating on top, grounding it a little bit, although it barely shows up, so I tried. So you could argue that some of these pieces might be too busy, but I happen to like most of them where they are and how they ended up. There are still a couple I feel are less successful than the others, but I'm perfectly happy leaving them where they are. So let me know, do you guys ever use these small panels? Do you like working on multiples at the same time? And if so, what is your favorite part? What value does that bring to you? Here are some individual shots of these next ones, and I will see you next time. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would love you to subscribe. And I would love to hear from you. So hit the like button, leave me a comment, send me a note on Instagram, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thanks, everybody.